What happens when the girl who lives with death becomes the woman an immortal recognizes as life itself? Tonight, we enter Victorian Edinburgh, 1880, where 16-year-old Moira Blackwood has spent the last 3 years sleeping in her family's funeral parlor, among the corpses her father prepares for burial. Not by choice, but by necessity. Her family is desperately poor, running a failing funeral business in Edinburgh's impoverished Old Town. And there's no room for Moira in the cramped living quarters above the preparation room. So she sleeps on a cot in the corner of the embalming chamber, surrounded by bodies awaiting burial, breathing the chemical smell of preservation fluids, waking to the sight of the dead. At 16, Moira has become numb to death. She helps her father prepare bodies, assists with dressing corpses, cleans the preparation tables without flinching. She's developed what her mother calls the death stare, empty eyes that don't react to horror, flat effect that suggests she's already half dead herself. The neighborhood children call her the corpse girl and avoid her. Potential suitors won't approach her because she smells like embalming fluid and speaks about death with disturbing casualness. Her own family treats her more like unpaid labor than daughter, useful for handling bodies, but otherwise irrelevant. Moira has accepted this existence, sleeping among the dead, living half alive, becoming gradually more like the corpses she tends until the boundary between living and dead seems meaningless. But tonight, her father brings in a body that's different. A man who appears dead but isn't decomposing properly, whose skin stays unnaturally preserved, whose presence makes Moira feel something she hasn't experienced in 3 years. Genuine fear. Because that body isn't actually dead. It's Kieran Nightshade, a 3,000-year-old alpha vampire who entered death-like torpor after severe injury and is now slowly awakening in a funeral parlor, sensed by the one living person in the building, the girl who sleeps among corpses. And when Kieran opens his eyes and finds Moira standing over him with embalming tools, he doesn't see the corpse girl everyone else perceives. He sees his destined mate who's been living half dead, and he's going to wake her back to life, pull her out of the death she's been drowning in, show her that she's meant for living rather than existing among the deceased, prove that the girl who sleeps with corpses deserves to wake up and actually live. Subscribe now, because this story will prove that those who've been sleeping among death are often awakened by those who understand that true immortality means choosing life over mere existence. Moira Blackwood woke to the sight she'd seen every morning for 3 years. Corpses on preparation tables, waiting for her father to make them presentable for burial. At 16, she slept on a cot in the corner of the Blackwood family funeral parlor's embalming chamber. Not because she wanted to, but because there was nowhere else. The family's living quarters above the parlor consisted of 2 small rooms, one for her parents, one for her 3 younger brothers. No space for Moira, so she'd been moved to the preparation room when she turned 13, given a cot among the dead, told to be useful and stop complaining. 3 years of sleeping surrounded by corpses. 3 years of breathing embalming fluid fumes. 3 years of waking to death and going to sleep with death and living with death until the boundary between living and deceased seemed meaningless. "Moira, we've got a new body," her father Duncan called down the stairs. "Gentleman found in Old Town. No identification, no family. City's paying us to prepare him for pauper's burial." Moira rose from her cot, pulled on her work apron, and helped her father carry the body down to the preparation room. The man was striking even in death, tall, with sharp features, dark hair, and skin that seemed oddly preserved despite supposedly being dead for hours. "Strange one," Duncan muttered, examining the body. No decomposition signs, no rigor mortis, almost like he's sleeping rather than dead. But the city coroner declared him deceased, so we prepare him anyway. Moira studied the corpse with the clinical detachment she'd developed over 3 years. Most bodies didn't affect her anymore. But this one was different. Something about his presence made her uneasy in ways the other corpses never had. Start with washing, Duncan instructed. I've got 3 other bodies to finish today. You can handle initial preparation. He left Moira alone with the mysterious corpse, and she began the familiar routine: washing, examining for injuries, preparing for embalming. But as she worked, she felt increasingly certain something was wrong. The body was too preserved, too lifelike, too present for something that should be dead. She was preparing the embalming equipment when she heard it, a faint heartbeat. Barely perceptible, slow and irregular, but definitely present. "Father," she called up the stairs. "This man isn't dead. He has a heartbeat." "Nonsense," Duncan called back. "The coroner declared him deceased. Continue preparation." But Moira hesitated, uncertain whether to proceed with embalming someone who might not actually be dead. She leaned closer to the body, listening for breathing, checking for any signs of life beyond that faint heartbeat. And the corpse opened its eyes. Moira stumbled backward, crashing into the preparation table. The man, the supposedly dead man, sat up with fluid grace that suggested he'd never been dead at all. "Where am I?" he asked with voice that carried slight accent Moira couldn't place. "The Blackwood Funeral Parlor," Moira replied automatically, too shocked to be properly afraid. "You were declared dead, brought here for burial preparation." "I wasn't dead," the man corrected, studying her with intense golden eyes. "I was in torpor, death-like state that mimics actual death. I'm Kieran Nightshade, and I'm a vampire. And you—" He paused, his expression shifting to recognition. "You're my destined mate, which means I need to ask you something crucial. Why does a living 16-year-old girl sleep among corpses?" Moira stared at this impossible man who claimed to be a vampire, uncertain whether to scream for her father or answer his question. "Because there's no room for me anywhere else," she whispered finally. "I'm the corpse girl. This is where I belong." "No," Kieran stated with absolute certainty. "This is not where you belong. You're meant for life, not death, and I'm going to prove that to you." Kieran stood from the preparation table with supernatural grace, studying Moira with expression mixing concern and recognition. "How long have you been sleeping here?" he asked, gesturing to the cot in the corner surrounded by embalming equipment and corpses. 3 years, Moira replied, still uncertain whether she was dreaming or if a supposed corpse was actually talking to her. "Since I turned 13, there's no space in the living quarters, so I sleep down here." "Among the dead," Kieran stated flatly. "A living child sleeping surrounded by corpses for 3 years. Moira, that is your name, yes? That's not normal. That's psychological abuse disguised as practical necessity." "It's just how things are," Moira said with the flat effect she'd developed. "Someone has to prepare bodies. Might as well be me. I've gotten used to it." "You've gotten numb to it," Kieran corrected. "There's difference between acceptance and psychological shutdown. Moira, I've been conscious for approximately 5 minutes, and I can already see what 3 years here has done to you. You move like you're half dead yourself. You speak about corpses with disturbing casualness. You've developed what I'd call death stare. Empty eyes that don't react to horror because you've been immersed in death so long that you've stopped feeling anything. That's not... Moira started to protest, but stopped. Because he was right. She had stopped feeling things. 3 years of waking to corpses, sleeping surrounded by death, breathing embalming fluid. It had hollowed her out. Made her into something that wasn't quite alive anymore. I need to leave, Kieran stated. I entered torpor after severe injury. I'm healed now, but I shouldn't remain in funeral parlor where someone might try to bury me. But Moira, I'm not leaving without you. What do you mean? Moira asked, confused. I mean, you're my destined mate, Kieran explained. Vampires recognize their perfect complement, the one person created to match them. And Moira, you're mine, which means I'm not leaving you to continue sleeping among corpses, developing further psychological damage from being treated as unpaid funeral labor rather than living daughter. You're coming with me. I can't just leave, Moira protested. My family needs me. Who will help with body preparation? Your family needs to stop treating their daughter like convenient corpse handler, Kieran interrupted sharply. Moira, you're 16. You should be living, experiencing normal adolescence, developing relationships, building future. Instead, you're sleeping among the dead and becoming progressively more like them. That's not acceptable. But I have nowhere else to go, Moira whispered. This is all I know. Death is all I know. I wouldn't know how to live normally anymore. Then I'll teach you, Kieran promised. Moira, I've been alive for 3,000 years. I understand death better than most humans ever could. But I also understand life. And I recognize when someone is drowning in death despite still breathing. You're half dead, Moira. You've been sleeping among corpses so long that you've forgotten what being fully alive feels like. I'm offering you a chance to wake up, to leave this funeral parlor and discover what living actually means. Will you come with me? Moira looked around the preparation room, the corpses, the embalming equipment, the cot where she'd slept for 3 years. Then she looked at Kieran, who was looking at her as if she was alive rather than just another body to prepare. Yes, she whispered, I'll come with you. Even if I don't know how to be alive anymore, I want to try. I want to wake up. Then let's get you out of this death chamber, Kieran said, extending his hand. It's time for the corpse girl to remember she's actually living. Kieran led Moira up the stairs from the preparation room to confront her father about taking her away from the funeral parlor. Duncan Blackwood was working on another corpse when they appeared, and his expression shifted from surprise to anger when he saw the supposedly dead man walking. What the devil? You were declared dead. How are you? I was never dead, Kieran interrupted coldly. I was in torpor, and I'm taking your daughter with me. Moira's needed here, Duncan protested. She helps with body preparation. We can't run the business without her. You're running a business that requires your 16-year-old daughter to sleep among corpses, Kieran stated with barely contained fury. That's not family business. That's child exploitation. Moira should be living normal adolescence, not developing psychological damage from being treated as unpaid corpse handler. She's got a roof over her head and food to eat, Duncan defended. That's more than many families can provide in Old Town. She should be grateful. She's got a cot among dead bodies and the emotional numbness that comes from 3 years immersed in death, Kieran corrected sharply. And now she's coming with me, where she can learn what being alive actually feels like. You can't just take my daughter. I'm not taking her, Kieran interrupted. She's choosing to come. Aren't you, Moira? Moira stood frozen between her father and this impossible vampire who'd awakened on the preparation table. Part of her wanted to return to the familiar numbness of the embalming chamber. But larger part recognized that Kieran was right. She'd been drowning in death for 3 years, becoming progressively less alive despite still breathing. I'm going with him, Moira said quietly, surprised by her own certainty. I can't sleep among corpses anymore, Father. I'm half dead already. I need to leave before I become completely like them. Moira, be reasonable, Duncan tried. You're just a girl. You need family. I need to be treated like living daughter rather than convenient corpse handler, Moira corrected, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. I've spent 3 years surrounded by death. I want to try being surrounded by life instead. Duncan looked ready to argue further, but Kieran's expression made clear that the conversation was over. Moira is coming with me, Kieran stated with supernatural authority. She'll have proper living quarters, psychological support, opportunity to develop normally rather than being treated as funeral labor. You can accept this gracefully, or I can make your business practices public knowledge. I suspect Edinburgh authorities would be interested to learn that a 16-year-old girl sleeps among corpses in your preparation room. Duncan paled, clearly realizing his funeral business could be shut down if authorities investigated their treatment of Moira. Fine, he said bitterly. Take her. But don't expect family support when she realizes living with a stranger is harder than having roof here. Having roof among corpses isn't actually having roof, Kieran replied. It's psychological torture, and Moira deserves better than death chamber disguised as bedroom. He led Moira out of the funeral parlor into Edinburgh's evening air, and Moira breathed deeply for the first time in years. Air that didn't smell like embalming fluid. Air that was associated with living rather than death. Thank you, she whispered, for waking me up, for helping me leave, for seeing me as alive rather than just another corpse handler. You were never just a corpse handler, Kieran replied gently. You were living girl drowning in death. And I'm going to help you remember what being alive feels like. Kieran brought Moira to an elegant townhouse in Edinburgh's New Town, a world away from the cramped funeral parlor in Old Town, where she'd spent 3 years sleeping among corpses. This is where you'll stay, Kieran explained, showing her to a bedroom that was nothing like the cot in the embalming chamber. Large windows let in natural light. The bed was comfortable. Most importantly, there were no corpses anywhere. I don't know how to sleep without dead bodies nearby, Moira admitted quietly. For 3 years, I've woken up to corpses every morning. Sleeping in normal bedroom feels wrong. That's trauma response, Kieran stated gently. Moira, you've been conditioned to associate sleep with death. Unlearning that will take time, but you don't have to do it alone. Over the following weeks, Kieran methodically helped Moira readjust to living among the living rather than the dead. Simple things that most 16-year-olds took for granted were revelations to Moira. Eating meals at tables rather than perched on embalming equipment. Wearing clothes that didn't smell like preservation chemicals. Going full days without touching a corpse. But the psychological adjustment was harder than physical changes. I can't stop thinking about death, Moira confessed one evening. I see people on the street and automatically assess how I'd prepare their bodies. I smell flowers and think of funeral arrangements. I've spent so long immersed in death that I don't know how to think about life. That's normal, Kieran assured her. Moira, You spent 3 critical developmental years, 13 to 16, surrounded by corpses. That's going to shape your perspective. But awareness of death doesn't mean you can't also embrace life. I'm 3,000 years old. I've seen more death than you can imagine. But I still choose life over mere existence. How? Moira asked. How do you stay connected to life when you've experienced so much death? By recognizing that death is natural endpoint, but life is the journey that matters, Kieran explained. Moira, the problem wasn't that you were exposed to death. Humans should understand mortality. The problem was that you were immersed in death to exclusion of everything else. You lived among corpses without experiencing normal adolescent life. That imbalance is what damaged you. I don't know how to have normal adolescent life, Moira admitted. I don't know how to make friends who don't smell like embalming fluid. I don't know how to be around living people without thinking about their eventual death. I'm broken, Kieran. 3 years among corpses broke something in me. You're not broken, Kieran corrected firmly. You're traumatized. There's crucial difference. Broken suggests permanent damage that can't be repaired. Traumatized means you've experienced harm that requires healing. And Moira, healing is possible. You can learn to think about life as much as you think about death. You can develop relationships with living people. You can wake up each morning without immediately cataloging corpses. But it will take time and conscious effort. Will I ever be normal? Moira asked quietly. You'll be yourself, Kieran replied. Which might include unusual comfort with mortality and death-adjacent topics that most people avoid. But that doesn't make you broken or wrong, just different. The goal isn't erasing 3 years of experience. The goal is balancing death awareness with life engagement. Becoming someone who understands death but chooses life anyway. I want that, Moira said. I want to choose life. I've been choosing death by default for 3 years, sleeping among corpses, thinking like corpse handler, becoming half dead myself. I want to wake up fully. I want to be alive. Then let's continue working toward that, Kieran promised. However long it takes. You're worth the investment. 6 months after Kieran rescued her, Moira returned to the funeral parlor to confront her father about what 3 years sleeping among corpses had done to her. Duncan was preparing a body when she arrived, and his expression shifted to discomfort when he saw her. Moira, we didn't expect to see you again after you left so dramatically. I left because sleeping among corpses was destroying me psychologically, Moira stated, surprised by her own directness. I came back to tell you that what you did, making me sleep in the embalming chamber for 3 years, that was abuse. That's excessive, Duncan protested. We provided for you. You had shelter, food. I had a cot surrounded by dead bodies, Moira interrupted. I breathed embalming fluid fumes every night. I woke up to corpses every morning. Father, I was 13 when you moved me to the preparation room. 13. And I spent 3 critical years developing amid death rather than life. Do you have any idea what that did to me? You were useful with body preparation, Duncan defended. You never complained, because I became numb, Moira stated flatly. I developed what Kieran calls death stare, empty affect that suggests I'm half dead myself. I lost ability to feel normal emotions because I was so immersed in death that living seemed meaningless. That's not being useful. That's being psychologically damaged by environmental trauma. You're being dramatic, Duncan insisted. Plenty of funeral workers live among their work. Adult funeral workers choose their profession, Moira corrected. I was a child assigned to sleep among corpses because there was no room for me in living quarters. That's not career choice. That's neglect disguised as practical necessity. Kieran appeared in the doorway with presence that made Duncan step back instinctively. Your daughter has been recovering for 6 months from 3 years of psychological trauma, Kieran stated coldly. She's learning to sleep without nightmares about corpses. She's developing ability to see living people without automatically thinking about death. She's remembering what being alive feels like after spending years becoming progressively more like the bodies she prepared. And you're calling that dramatic rather than acknowledging the harm you caused. I did what was necessary to keep the business running, Duncan defended. You sacrificed your daughter's psychological health for business convenience, Kieran corrected. Duncan, Moira was 13, barely adolescent, when you moved her to death chamber. She spent ages 13 through 16 immersed in death during crucial developmental period. That's not acceptable parenting. That's exploitation that caused lasting damage. What do you want from me? Duncan asked wearily. I want you to acknowledge what you did was wrong, Moira said quietly. That making me sleep among corpses damaged me. That treating me as corpse handler rather than daughter had consequences. I don't need apology. I need acknowledgement that what happened to me wasn't normal or acceptable. Duncan looked at his daughter, then at the embalming chamber where she'd slept for 3 years, then back. You're right, he said finally. It wasn't normal. It wasn't acceptable. You were just child, and we treated you as convenient labor. I'm sorry, Moira. I'm sorry we made you sleep among dead. I'm sorry we didn't see what it was doing to you. Moira felt tears streaming down her face. Not tears of pain, but tears of validation. Thank you, she whispered, for acknowledging it. For admitting it was harmful. That's what I needed to hear. She left the funeral parlor with Kieran, feeling lighter than she had in years. Thank you for coming with me, she said, for supporting me while I confronted him. You're worth supporting, Kieran replied. And Moira, you're recovering remarkably well from 3 years that could have broken you permanently. You're stronger than you realize. 1 year after Kieran awakened on the preparation table, he raised the question of vampire transformation during one of their evening conversations. We need to discuss your long-term future, Kieran said carefully. You've been healing from 3 years sleeping among corpses, learning to engage with life rather than defaulting to death. But Moira, we must address practical questions. Do you want to remain human, or are you interested in vampire transformation? What would transformation entail? Moira asked, pulse quickening. 3 days of intense pain as your body dies and resurrects as something supernatural, Kieran explained honestly. You'd gain abilities beyond human limitations: strength, speed, enhanced senses, immortality. You'd need to feed on blood regularly. But Moira, I need to be completely clear about something regarding your relationship with death. Would transformation change how I think about death? Moira asked carefully. Transformation would make you functionally immortal, Kieran confirmed. You'd stop aging, heal from injuries, potentially live forever. But Moira, it doesn't erase 3 years you spent sleeping among corpses. Those experiences shaped your psychology. You'd be vampire who's unusually comfortable with death, who understands mortality in ways most vampires don't, who sees death as familiar rather than frightening. That perspective wouldn't disappear with transformation. So I'd still be the corpse girl, Moira stated quietly. just immortal corpse girl instead of human one. You'd still be Moira who understands death deeply, Kieran corrected gently. But understanding death and being half dead yourself are different things. You've spent years learning to engage with life, developing friendships, experiencing normal activities, waking up without immediately cataloging corpses. Transformation wouldn't erase that progress. You'd be vampire who understands both death and life, rather than girl drowning in death while forgetting how to live. I've spent years recovering from sleeping among the dead, Moira said slowly. Learning that I don't have to be defined by death exposure, that I can think about life as much as death. Would transformation make me obsessed with death again? Transformation makes you immortal, Kieran explained, which means you experience death as something that happens to others but not to you. Some new vampires become obsessed with mortality they've escaped. Others become comfortable with death because they're no longer vulnerable to it. Given your background, you'd probably fall into second category, vampire who's unusually at ease with death because you spent formative years immersed in it. Is that healthy? Moira asked. Being comfortable with death? It's healthy if balanced with engagement in life, Kieran replied. Moira, the problem wasn't that you understood death. The problem was that you understood only death. You lived among corpses without experiencing normal life. Now you've learned to balance death awareness with life engagement. Transformation wouldn't destroy that balance. It would just make you an immortal version of who you've become. When would we proceed? Moira asked. Not yet, Kieran stated firmly. Moira, you're 17 now. You've spent 1 year recovering from 3 years of trauma. That's remarkable progress, but you need more time developing as human before choosing immortality. You need to experience normal adolescence, build relationships, discover who you are without death defining you, make transformation choice from strength rather than escape. How long should I wait? Moira asked. However long you need, Kieran replied. I've waited 3,000 years for my mate. I can wait longer for you to be ready. Your well-being matters more than my preferences, always. Thank you, Moira said softly, for not rushing me, for letting me heal fully before choosing immortality, for helping me wake up from death before offering me eternal life. You deserve to be fully alive before choosing forever, Kieran stated. That's not negotiable. 3 years after Kieran awakened on the preparation table, Moira had transformed psychologically in ways that had nothing to do with vampire nature. She'd gone from being the half-dead corpse girl to being fully alive 19-year-old who understood death but chose life. The real breakthrough came when Moira chose to study medicine, specifically working with dying patients in Edinburgh's hospitals. Not because she was obsessed with death, but because she recognized her unusual comfort with mortality could help others. You're choosing to work with death again, Kieran observed with careful concern. Are you certain that's healthy given your history? I'm choosing to help living people face death with dignity, Moira corrected. That's different from sleeping among corpses while becoming progressively more dead myself. I understand death in ways most people don't. I can sit with dying patients without fear or discomfort. That's valuable skill, Kieran. I'm using what 3 years among corpses taught me. But now I'm applying it to helping the living rather than just preparing the dead. Over months of medical work, Moira discovered she had genuine gift for end-of-life care. She could discuss death calmly without false cheerfulness or obvious discomfort. She could help patients and families navigate dying process with honesty and compassion. She used her death-adjacent background as strength rather than weakness. "You've completely transformed," Kieran observed one evening. 3 years ago, you were half-dead girl who'd forgotten how to live. Now you're a vibrant young woman who understands death but chooses life anyway. "I learned from you," Moira replied. "You taught me that understanding death doesn't mean being consumed by it. That I could acknowledge mortality while still engaging fully with living. You showed me that the corpse girl wasn't who I had to be. That was just a traumatized version of myself that needed healing." "You did the healing work," Kieran corrected. "I just provided safe environment for recovery." "You provided more than safe environment," Moira stated. "You saw me as alive when everyone else treated me as half-dead. You recognized I was drowning in death and pulled me out. You believed I could wake up and actually live rather than just existing among corpses. That belief gave me permission to believe it too." "I'm proud of who you've become," Kieran said quietly. "The woman who works with dying patients, helps families navigate grief, uses her unusual comfort with death as gift rather than curse. You've taken something that could have destroyed you and transformed it into strength." "I'm ready for vampire transformation," Moira stated, surprising them both with her certainty. "Not because I'm escaping death or desperate for immortality, but because I've experienced being half-dead and learned to be fully alive. I've spent 3 years recovering, developing, discovering who I am beyond trauma. I know myself now. I'm ready to become a supernatural version of who I've become. Someone who understands death but chooses life, who's comfortable with mortality but engaged with living, who's the corpse girl transformed into vibrant woman." "You're absolutely certain?" Kieran asked. "You've achieved remarkable healing as human. You don't need transformation to validate that growth." "I'm certain," Moira confirmed. "I want to spend eternity with someone who woke me from death. I want to continue helping dying patients across centuries. I want to be a vampire who understands mortality despite being immortal. I'm choosing transformation from life, not from death. And that makes all the difference." "Then let's discuss proceeding," Kieran agreed. "You're ready, fully alive, fully yourself, fully aware of what you're choosing. The corpse girl has completely awakened." 4 years after Kieran awakened on the preparation table, Moira made her final decision about transformation. She was 20 now, genuinely comfortable with who she'd become, and ready for whatever came next. "I want transformation," she told Kieran one evening. "Not because I'm the traumatized corpse girl trying to escape her past, but because I'm a woman who's integrated that past into strength, who understands death in ways most humans never will, who wants to spend eternity helping others face mortality with dignity. I'm choosing this from life, not from death." Kieran studied her carefully. "You're absolutely certain? You've achieved extraordinary healing. You've transformed from half-dead girl into vibrant woman who uses death awareness as gift. You don't need vampire transformation to prove you've recovered." "I don't need it to prove recovery," Moira agreed. "I'm choosing it to enhance life I've built. Kieran, I spent 3 years sleeping among corpses, becoming progressively more like them. Then I spent 4 years learning to be alive, engaging with living, building relationships, discovering that understanding death doesn't mean being consumed by it. Now I want to combine those experiences into being a vampire who understands both death and life, who's immortal but intimately familiar with mortality, who can help dying humans across centuries because I know death as both observer and former victim. Your relationship with death will be unusual for vampire," Kieran observed. Most vampires fear death because we've escaped it. You'll be vampire who's comfortable with death because you spent formative years immersed in it. That perspective could be isolating. Or it could be valuable, Moira countered. How many vampires truly understand what dying humans experience? I've slept among corpses, prepared bodies, sat with dying patients. I know death intimately, not as abstract concept, but as concrete reality. That knowledge could help vampire community engage with humans more compassionately. That's profound perspective, Kieran admitted. When can we proceed? Moira asked. Immediately, if you're ready, Kieran replied. But Moira, I want you to understand something important. After transformation, you'll be a mortal woman who spent 3 years sleeping among corpses during critical developmental period. Those experiences shaped you. They'll remain part of who you are even after transformation. You'll be vampire with unusual death awareness. Is that acceptable? It's not just acceptable, it's who I am, Moira stated firmly. I'm not trying to erase 3 years among corpses. I'm integrating those experiences into strength. Yes, I slept with dead bodies and became half dead myself. But I also learned things about death that most people never understand. I developed comfort with mortality that makes me valuable to dying patients. That's not trauma requiring elimination. That's experience requiring integration. I want to be vampire who carries that knowledge into immortality. Then you're genuinely ready, Kieran concluded. Most transformation candidates want to escape their past. You're embracing yours while moving forward. That's remarkable maturity. I learned it from you, Moira replied. You could have treated me as broken thing requiring fixing. Instead, you treated me as traumatized person requiring healing. You taught me that past experiences shape us without defining us. That being the corpse girl doesn't mean being half dead forever. It means understanding death in ways that can become strength. Thank you for waking me up, Kieran. For pulling me out of death and teaching me to choose life. Now I want to spend eternity living fully, with someone who understood I was drowning and helped me breathe again. Then let's begin, Kieran said. Let's transform the girl who slept among the dead into the woman who chooses eternal life. The transformation process began with Kieran draining approximately half of Moira's blood, bringing her to death's threshold. Then came the venom, burning through her system with fire that consumed her awareness. 3 days of excruciating agony followed, every cell dying and resurrecting as something supernatural. But Moira had survived 3 years sleeping among corpses, survived becoming half dead herself and finding her way back to life. Physical pain felt almost manageable by comparison. What concerned her was whether transformation would change her relationship with death, whether becoming immortal would make her fear mortality she'd once been so comfortable with. The transformation completed on the 3rd day. The pain stopped abruptly, and Moira opened eyes that now saw with supernatural clarity. She could hear sounds at impossible distances, sense presences in ways she'd never imagined, feel strength flowing through her transformed body. But the first thought she had was about death. I still understand death, she said wonderingly, her vampire voice carrying slight melodic quality. I'm immortal now, but I still remember what dying feels like. I still carry knowledge from 3 years sleeping among corpses. Transformation didn't erase that. It just made me supernatural version of someone who knows death intimately. I promised transformation wouldn't erase your experiences, Kieran confirmed, appearing beside her with expression of awe. You're still Moira, still woman who understands death deeply, who spent formative years immersed in mortality, who learned to integrate that experience into strength. Just supernatural version now. Your death awareness didn't disappear. It became part of immortal perspective. Moira tested her vampire abilities. Strength, speed, enhanced senses all beyond human capability. She was powerful now, immortal, extraordinary, in ways that had nothing to do with her past. But she still carried memories of sleeping among corpses, still understood death in ways most vampires never would. "I'm not the corpse girl anymore," she stated, testing the words. "But I'm also not completely separated from that past. I'm vampire who knows death intimately, despite being immortal. That's unusual, isn't it?" "It's unique," Kieran agreed. "Most vampires fear death because we've escaped it. You're a vampire who's comfortable with death because you survived being immersed in it. That perspective is rare and valuable, Moira. You'll be able to help dying humans in ways other vampires can't, because you remember what death felt like, what it meant to live among corpses and become half-dead yourself. You carry human death experience into vampire immortality." "Is that healthy?" Moira asked. "Being immortal, but still comfortable with death?" "It's healthy because you're comfortable with death while choosing life," Kieran replied. "Moira, 3 years ago you were half dead, sleeping among corpses, thinking like corpse handler, becoming progressively less alive. Now you're fully alive despite being technically undead. You understand death but engage with life. That's perfect balance, acknowledging mortality while choosing to live fully. Your transformation didn't erase death awareness. It just freed you to live eternally while carrying that knowledge." Moira felt overwhelming emotion, not fear or regret, but profound acceptance of who she'd become. "Thank you," she whispered, "for waking me from death 4 years ago, for teaching me to choose life while integrating death experience, for showing me that being the corpse girl didn't mean being half dead forever. It meant understanding death in ways that become strength. I'm alive, Kieran. Fully, completely, eternally alive. The girl who slept among the dead has chosen to live forever. And I'll spend eternity ensuring you remember that choice," Kieran promised. "You're alive, Moira. You always deserved to be." A century after Moira's transformation, her work with dying patients had influenced multiple human societies to approach death with more dignity and compassion. Not everywhere, not completely, but progress measured in thousands of peaceful deaths. "You're changing how humans face mortality," Kieran observed as Moira successfully helped establish a hospice program in early 20th century London. "That's extraordinary impact for someone who started as traumatized girl sleeping among corpses." "I'm using what those 3 years taught me," Moira replied. "Understanding death intimately, being comfortable with mortality despite being immortal, recognizing that dying is natural process deserving dignity. I survived being the corpse girl. Now I help others face death without becoming half dead themselves. That's victory over trauma that could have destroyed me." Their relationship had deepened across decades into partnership that transcended mate bond. They complemented each other perfectly. He brought 3,000 years of perspective on mortality. She brought personal experience with being immersed in death that gave her unique insight into helping others navigate dying. "Do you ever regret that transformation didn't erase your death awareness?" Kieran asked one evening as they reflected on a century together. "Never," Moira replied emphatically. "My death awareness is my greatest strength. Yes, I spent 3 years sleeping among corpses and becoming half dead. but those experiences taught me things about mortality that most vampires, most humans, never understand. I know what it feels like to be surrounded by death. I know how it damages psychologically. I know how to recover and integrate that experience into strength. If transformation had erased that knowledge, I'd have lost ability to help dying patients as effectively. I'm grateful I remained vampire who understands death intimately. That's profound wisdom, Kieran observed. I learned it from you, Moira replied with a smile that still, after a century, made Kieran's heart respond. You taught me that past trauma shapes us without destroying us, that being the corpse girl was temporary state requiring healing, not permanent identity, that I could understand death deeply while choosing life fully. You woke me from death, Kieran. You pulled me out of funeral parlor where I was drowning among corpses and taught me to breathe again. That gift, the gift of awakening, of choosing life over mere existence, is more valuable than anything else you could have given me. You were always worth awakening, Kieran said. Your father was just too blind to see you needed saving from death chamber disguised as bedroom. A century after her human death, vampire historians documented Moira's story. The corpse girl who slept among the dead became legendary vampire advocate who helped dying humans face mortality with dignity. They called her the Awakened One, the vampire who proved that those immersed in death can emerge stronger, that trauma can transform into strength, that understanding death deeply doesn't prevent choosing life fully. But Moira had simpler understanding. She'd been half dead, sleeping among corpses, drowning in death until someone awakened her and taught her to live. She'd survived 3 years of psychological trauma that could have destroyed her, integrated those experiences into profound death awareness, and spent eternity helping others navigate mortality with compassion born from personal experience. The corpse girl became the awakened advocate. The half-dead daughter became the fully alive vampire. The girl who slept among corpses became the woman who chose eternal life. And she had forever to continue proving that those who've been drowning in death are often awakened by those who understand that true immortality means choosing life over mere existence. That understanding death doesn't mean being consumed by it, and that the strongest people are often those who've survived being half dead and emerged fully alive. She was awake, completely, eternally, joyfully awake. And the vampire who'd awakened on her preparation table would spend eternity ensuring she remained engaged with life, that the death awareness she carried never pulled her back into half-dead existence, and that the corpse girl who'd learned to live would never forget that being alive, fully, vibrantly, extraordinarily alive, was her right and her choice and her triumph over death that once tried to claim her while she still breathed.